the proceedings of this motion, and I will explain my justifications. Mr. Ray Chan proposes a motion to adjourn debate of this motion. We will first deal with the motion. Mr. Ray Chan, please speak on your motion. Thank you. I might not necessarily use up my 15-minute time slot. I agree with the idea of this exercise, but the use of outdated energy labels might mislead the public, and this is unfair to manufacturers of the most energy efficient TVs. To encourage the government to introduce a more meticulous classification system, I'm moving a motion to adjourn. You may say that I'm imposing pressure on the government, and you might also say that I'm allowing everyone to offer their comments to the government. Yesterday, a number of members would still like to speak, and they could not finish. The current classification system has 5 classes. I will not repeat the formula. As for the energy efficiency index, if it's 0.4 or lower, an appliance can receive a grade 1 label. Grade 1 is already the maximum level in Hong Kong, but it cannot help consumers choose the most energy efficient TVs. As I said, the EU has a 10-class system. In Hong Kong, those with 0.4 EI or less would be classified as Class 1, but in EU it would only be considered Class B, which is not the highest level. For appliances of 0.1 or 0.4 EI, they all belong to Class 1. And given the circumstances, consumers cannot tell whether the TVs they buy can achieve the greatest energy and cost savings, and they cannot tell whether they are the most energy efficient. For the middle class, the electricity bill might not matter too much, and they might rather pay more to buy more energy efficient appliances. They are thinking about our planet rather than themselves. As the Secretary said, to encourage behavior change is one of the effective measures for saving energy. So why can't we aim for the best? If we can introduce the EU's 10-class system, the public can tell, or they can choose the most energy efficient TVs of 0.1 EEI. But if the public does not know that the spectrum within Class 1 is so wide, with the passing of the subsidiary legislation, then our appliances would only correspond to Class B in the EU system. Some members might say that we are too picky and we should just take this on board, and we've waited for 9 years. And some people might say we should just pocket the proposal. You know, I would not criticize you because this is not the same as political reform. But over the course of our debate, if you do not do it now, then you would explain why you do not adopt the EU's 10-class system. Perhaps you might say this is trivial, but would you promise to do it in the future? Or if we adjourn this debate, you can work on it tomorrow and you can come back with a 10-class system. There's an 18-month grace period. Is there any room for improvement? 0.1 and 0.4 are very different. Let me give you an example. A 40-inch TV, the EEI is 0.4. According to the government's formula, 10 minutes would consume 84 watts, and for the appliance with 0.1 EEI, using it for 10 minutes would only consume 21 watts. But under the government's labeling system, for the 40-inch TV, for both sets of 40-inch TVs, they would be assigned the same class. They carry the same label. So the public, well, the consumers have to read the manuals and everything before they can tell whether they are buying the best TV. Sadly, if we cannot improve the classification system at this point, I'm not sure if other members would support what I say. At least you should introduce an additional measure above the system to help consumers make the right choice. You are actually misleading the public. You are unfair to manufacturers making the most efficient TVs. In the future, we might see even more energy efficient TVs. So why aren't you doing or aiming for the best in legislation? No, maybe by next year, everyone will be making 0.1 EEI TVs, and manufacturers might invest in more in order to secure the Class A label. Now, people might get complacent if they can achieve 0.4 with the mandatory labeling scheme. Well, I gave the examples of two sets of TVs which are both rated Class A. So isn't this unfair to the better performing model? And to be fair, the energy labels also carry annual consumption. So by comparing the total consumption, consumers can also draw comparison, and there's no need to introduce more stringent requirements. This is what the government might think, but I think you are just ignoring the consumers. The objective of introducing energy labels is to help consumers distinguish which models are more energy efficient. The average consumer might not know about the difference or interpret the difference in annual consumption. But they would be more drawn to the energy label. The EU's energy labels also carry total annual consumption, but they are more meticulous in their classification, because most consumers would look at the overall label. So if we do not come up with a more meticulous classification system to better inform consumers so that they can make the best choices, we have to explain ourselves to the public. My view actually aligns with the Consumer Council's latest report. The CC was aware of deficiencies in the current labeling system. Does it mean that they ignore the annual consumption figures? Of course not. The CC's role is to examine whether the energy labels could be misleading from the consumer's point of view, and they feel that the existing system might mislead consumers. That's why they came up with this study and announced the results. The CC looked at air conditioners, which are mostly used in the summer, but for TVs, some families leave them on around the clock. And I don't encourage you to do that. if the classification system is too simple, consumers might inadvertently buy more energy-consuming TVs, and that would affect the government. That would affect the environment or even our planet. So, who would pay the price for that? And most of you support the motion. And if members do not support my motion, I would not have hard feelings. But we should still speak up against the government's classification system. If the government can promise to review their classification system, if you cast objection or abstain, I would not have hard feelings. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. And the debate of the motion is to be adjourned. Mr. Jeremy Tam. First of all, I do not support Mr. Ray Chan's motion to adjourn proceedings. Other countries around the world are basically doing the same thing, and there is a consensus that energy labels are needed. And for the sector, even though they feel that the grace period can be extended, both the sector and consumers are prepared to face changes in the energy labels.
And then if you all of a sudden you adjourn the motion and we don't know how long the delay will be, I'm afraid that this amendment order will get nowhere. And then maybe there will be further delays in the future. This is something that I don't want to see. Now, after the implementation of this scheme, there will be a reduction of CO2 emission of 105,000 tons and a potential annual energy saving of around 150 million kilowatts. So that can deal with climate change as well as save money for people. We are including more products under the third phase, and I fully support that because we would enable the consumers to know the energy efficiency performance of the products and also enhance competition among product suppliers, especially for manufacturers who would like to help carbon emission. If we have delays of the order, that will be very unfair to them because their products outperform others in the market. If we pass this order later, then that would be unfair to them because they are offering products which are superior, and consumers will not know that their products can save so much energy. There may be further new products to be included under the scheme. And more manufacturers now may be developing new products ready to be launched onto the market. So if we have an adjournment of the motion, that will create great impact, and consumers will have fewer choices. But I have to say that the pace has been too slow in implementing the program. The EMSD launched the voluntary scheme in 1995, and the mandatory scheme was only implemented in 2009 and will be implemented in 3 phases to cover progressively the different products. The 3 products were covered in the first phase: air conditioners, CFLs, and refrigerating applicants. And on the 9th of September 2011, the second phase was extended to 2 other types of products: washing machines and dehumidifiers, and that was fully implemented in the 19th of September 2011. It's been 6 years on, and the government took a long time to work on the third phase. So the government has spent 22 years to come to the third phase. So all the more reason that we should not have further delays. Some members may think that this is not the best package. There is room for improvement. But I think the administration should be given the chance to try this out first and conduct a review as soon as possible to see if more products can be covered. And I think the administration should strive to promote sustainable consumption. We should not be taking a across-the-board approach. We should not just ask people to cut down on consumption. We must encourage people to make the best use of resources. And if people can opt for energy-efficient products, that should not suffice. We should enhance our publicity and public education. We should encourage people to not use certain functions of the products. And the MSD has said that if a household has 10 to 11 products which are on standby mode, if they are totally switched off, the electricity consumption can be cut by 3%. More and more products are being used now, and a lot of them are not on the list. And I understand why Mr. Raymond Chen asked for an adjournment of the debate. There are certain products which are not on either scheme. For example, the soya milk cooker is not on the list, and also mosquito device, and they are turned on. They are left on all the time. So should we be looking at those products? The more the delay we have, then more products will not be regulated, and as a result, we'll be seeing a waste of resources on the planet, and we can't save money. Going by overseas examples, in France, for the property agents there, for their promotional leaflets, there is the energy indicator of every household printed, whether you are letting out or renting out your flat, your indicator has to be accredited by the expert, and you have to present the indicator for buyer's reference. I don't think we can cover that in our current legislative amendment exercise. But some members may say that this is a good initiative, and we should be looking at the energy efficiency of a home as a whole and not at the individual products. And that's good. And if we just adjourn the debate, I think we are coming to a standstill, and we are in fact retrogressing in our efforts. Now, green buildings, green households, we should not be just confining ourselves to green products. We should have been looking at green buildings. Well, please come back to this motion, is whether to adjourn the debate of the motion. I think you are digressing. Thank you, President. Thank you for your reminder. So I don't think we should adjourn the debate. I oppose that, not because I'm fully satisfied with all the proposals. No. What I'm most unhappy about is about petrol cars. I would not support the adjournment because petrol cars are left out. No. But then this is a major consideration in our efforts. And well, people may think that because of this issue of petrol cars, there should be an adjournment. Now, Hong Kong, in the past 10 years, there's been a rise of 45% in the number of vehicles in Hong Kong. Now, under the MEELS, or rather, well, for the voluntary scheme, you will cover petrol cars. So it comes under the voluntary scheme. It doesn't cover the diesel cars or lorries either. If you look at the unleaded petrol cars, going by CNSD's figures, in 2016, every year, Mr. Jeremy Tam, I think you are digressing. Please come back to this, the crux of the matter. President, I meant to speak on why some members would like to have an adjournment of this motion. Excuse me. Sorry, President. Members may think that the issue of petrol cars is the reason for adjourning the motion. I don't think that should be the case. If they think that, that's very unfortunate. But I must emphasize that cars are a very important issue, and we should not ignore its part in the energy consumption in Hong Kong. If we are to adjourn this motion, apart from the manufacturings of the electric products, they're going to be affected. But then there's this other issue of cost. It comes under the voluntary energy efficiency labeling scheme. And, well, let me remind you for the last time, you are digressing. Yes, understand, President. I just wanted to explain why cars may be the reason why some members believe that the debate should be adjourned. Well, that is not covered under the MEELS. Well, that's uncovered under the voluntary scheme. Well, this is not a debate on energy efficiency as a whole. Now, if you don't digress any further, I have to stop you from speaking. Yes, well, maybe I haven't misunderstood the whole thing. Now, under the energy efficiency labeling of products, they do cover cars, so that's why I mentioned it. There is another paper that I would like you to refer to. Thank you, President, for pointing out this. For the voluntary energy efficiency labeling scheme, there it is stated that petrol passenger cars is covered. Well, you can save that for a discussion at the panel meeting. We are talking about the MEELS and not the voluntary scheme. Please come back to this subject. Well, if that is the case, and I'll have a last word here. Now, whether it's on the part of the consumers or the manufacturers or the power companies, in terms of the use of resources and electricity consumption, it's better to have this ordinance than not having this ordinance. And there are so many bills on the waiting list to be discussed. And if we have an adjournment of this debate, and that's going to be a big problem. Maybe we will deal with it again next year. And there will be an 18-month transitional period. So what happens to that? It will become an indefinite period for transition. So I don't want to see Hong Kong people becoming another type of big wasters, wasting electricity away. And this resolution also help them save money. So I appeal to members not to support this adjournment motion. Mr. James Toh. President. Yesterday and this morning, the Council has been debating on the energy efficiency labeling of products ordinance amendment of Schedule 1 Order 2017, and we've spent hours in debating this. A majority of members are supporting this order. Of course, it's been discussed at the subcommittee as well. So I wonder why Mr. Raymond Chan has all of a sudden moved this adjournment motion. And I couldn't get it in the beginning. Then I heard what he said. I spent a short time to analyze his rationale for adjournment and what will happen if there is no adjournment. And I have tried to compare the two scenarios and see whether this should be the right approach. Now, we've debated it for so long and nobody is in opposition. and even the manufacturers, the intermediaries, and there is a whole system of people involved. And though there is an 18-month transition period, they are psychologically prepared for this. And all of a sudden, you are calling for an adjournment. And what Mr. Chen meant is that he would like to push the government to make more commitments, has been very open and frank about it. Well, the secretary was supposed to respond towards the end of the debate, but in his reply to this adjournment motion, if, say, he can make a commitment to do certain things, for example, to come up with a more meticulous classification system, asking us then not to adjourn the debate, and maybe he can include a number of products as well. And the government should also take the lead in acquiring such products, and also maybe try to tighten the standards for certain products after a period of time. So if the government responds like that, then Mr. Raymond Chan said that he welcomed your opposition of his motion.
If the administration does not give any undertaking, well, I don't know, because after the administration has spoken, I don't have a chance to reply. So if the administration gives an undertaking, what will be my stand? And if they don't, what will be my stance? Well, they have been asked for the same thing for a very long time. When I refer to the subcommittee's report, members in the subcommittee have been asking the administration for the same thing. So if they could give you the undertaking, they would have in the subcommittee meeting. Is it the case that because Mr. Chan has moved this motion, they will give the undertaking? So let me first start by assuming that they don't give that undertaking. Then I have to consider Mr. Chan's motion. If it is adjourned, will the administration give us something? So this is the theory of how much we accept. We understand that there is global warming. We need to conserve energy. This is public interest. We need to save the earth, and the world's doing it. So the more stringent approach is not taken, and there is no timetable. If we just accept what we are offered, or if we turn it down, if we delay it, what will be the impact? Mr. Tam said no, because if you delay it, good companies, that means those that have done preparations, will suffer because it is better than before. However, when it comes to the mandatory scheme, well, there's already a trend. A lot of companies have launched new products. Consumers always want something that saves energy, but it may be a bit more expensive. It's just like cars. So they will make the calculations. If they benefit in the end, they will buy. So before this order is endorsed, a lot of the products have already been launched in the market because manufacturers know consumer behavior. This may not be, even though it's not yet mandatory, there are disadvantages if it's not mandatory because they just rely on promoting other aspects. Say, for example, is high quality. Even though they are not as energy efficient. When they have the label, if it is mandatory, then everyone needs to to put a label on the products. Then there is one more thing for comparison. Energy conserving products will highlight this point in their marketing campaign. Because it's mandatory, you can't get away with it. So whether it is mandatory or not, if the motion is not adjourned and this is mandatory, that means it needs to be cancelled as soon as possible. Well, for a voluntary scheme, it can be labeled like the more gradings of the EU. Say in Hong Kong it's voluntary. You can say we are EU grade this and that. Consumers can't make a direct comparison. But if you highlight something, consumer will want to know and whether they benefit, whether they can save the world, whether they can save money. So good companies may be penalized. That is, Mr. Tam's point is not strong. And do we accept it by supporting Mr. Chan's motion? If we don't support Mr. Chan, if Mr. Chan's motion is not passed, that means this order is not passed. Well, Mr. Chan talks about television because television is covered. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know about the chairman. I don't know about the president. A lot of youngsters, people use monitors. They watch television on it. And the time spent is more than when a television is used for the same purpose. So if Mr. Chan's motion is passed, television should, monitors should be covered by television. I'm sure it will come as very quickly because that is the trend. If the government's order is passed, that means Mr. Chan's motion is not passed. It's at a huge extent because yesterday I said is 70% of household products. Commercial ones are not included, but 70% of household. But if we pass the administration's order, progress will be slow. We may as well not have it because they have to queue up. It will take time. I think the extent will not be a big leap, but if it is not passed, more will be added. it may not be the case that they come back in 2 weeks' time to come back to beg us by offering more, because this order has been in process for so long, and at the same time they're doing other things, say for example monitors. So if it is not passed, I believe that they will come back very quickly with a bigger leap. So when I first heard Mr. Chan, I thought, well, I should oppose, but as I was listening to him, I had to think. I was thinking whether I should be shaken. But people who buy electrical appliances, say television, storage type, electric water heaters, we are consumers. We have been doing it for many years, especially for water heaters. Televisions last longer unless you want to change the model. So we postpone it by a number of months. We can actually do the maths, because at the same time models changes very quickly. Prices drop. And people in the meantime will have more money. And there is the feel-good factor. Say for example, higher definition and bigger ones. And if you buy it now with no mandatory label, you won't replace it in a few years. And if you don't replace it, if you wait for the later ones, well, you would have passed the critical point. Lastly, let me conclude. I understand Mr. Chan wants the administration to, in the concluding remark, give some undertaking. And I have analyzed it, assuming that they don't give the analysis or they don't give another undertaking. I have weighed things out. I incline to oppose to Mr. Chan's motion, because that is important, because we are walking down the path. Well, is there misunderstanding, misleading society to go back, and misleading the council? Well, suppliers won't be misled because they know full well what the administration is doing. And if they know that if they don't continue to improve on efficiency or to prevent, for some reason, standards will be raised for no reason next time, there's nothing they can do. I understand Hong Kong is a small market. The biggest market is not Hong Kong. And mainland, there is a subsidy on electric appliances, and there is also the EU standard. But there is an incentive because the EU market is huge. If it's been raised all the time, it's just the case that they use this chance to dump their product, because they want to sell those that are old. Mr. Kenneth Leung, yesterday we spent most of yesterday on the resolution under the Energy Efficiency Labeling of Product Ordinance. This morning, Mr. Ray Chan moves under Rule 41(1) of the RoP to adjourn this debate. If I am to support this motion to adjourn, then three conditions. One of the three conditions will have to be met. 1 out of 3. First, if this debate is to be adjourned, that means perhaps within 12 months, that is a very short time, the administration will come up with a more effective, more comprehensive, broader amendment on the labeling scheme to render the third phase not as effective. I don't see that the administration can within 12 months come up with such an amendment. A more comprehensive amendment. It's just like what Mr. Ray Chan said. How come there are only 5 grades in Hong Kong, whereas in EU there are 10 grades? If we use television sets as an example, that's one of the types of products covered under phase 3. There are different types of televisions. We have those that are cathode tube from plasma TV, and there was a liquid crystal display in the 1990s, and then there was different types of LED televisions. There are many different types of television sets. Of course, you know that for the cathode tube, it was used in the 1980s. It consumed a lot of energy compared to plasma TV, LED TV, LCD TV, and this organic light emitting diode television. Well, these different types of television sets, can they be differentiated under the current 5 grades? Say, for example, the last 3 types, that they are more energy conserving to get consumers to buy them, because plasma, OED, OLED, if they all get grade 1, that is not enough information. If we can break it down into greater details, that will provide more choices and more information to consumers. And when consumers make the decision to purchase, they will look at, well, say for example it's $3,000, but it consumes more electricity. Then they will think, well, the other product that saves energy. Mr. Leung, let me remind you that this is not the debate on the labeling scheme. Yes, I have finished with television. I'm now going to continue to the first condition. That is, unless the administration can come up with a more complete, comprehensive proposal, I will not support Mr. Chan's motion to adjourn.
Another thing that the government couldn't do, you must allow me to say this other point. It's related to electrical appliances, and it's related to the energy labeling. That is, there is a compulsory building energy efficiency labeling scheme. But here, for this energy efficiency labeling of products ordinance, it's not linked to buildings energy efficiency scheme. Now, power consumption accounts for 90% of electricity consumption in households accounts for 90% of power consumption in Hong Kong. But for buildings, because they're not products, so there are no energy efficiency labeling. For example, the lighting system in buildings, air conditioning system, elevators and escalators in buildings, they all consume electricity, but because they're not electrical appliances, they are not included in this labeling of products ordinance. Mr. Kenneth Leung, I think you should refer this matter back to the panel for discussion. Yes, please come back to this motion. Now, the government's not able to come up with a more comprehensive labeling system within 12 months. But if the government is able to do so, then I will support Mr. Ray Chan's motion. That is, I'll ask the government to withdraw this motion for the time being and come up with a better option. Because if they do it, just tweak some here and there, it is really quite annoying to the public. Now, are there other conditions? that will lead me to conclude there is need to stop this order in its track. And that condition would be that this order would do nothing at all. It serves no purpose, that is. Now, why do we want to conserve energy? Because we want to curb climate change. Allow me to say this, in the Paris Convention, in 2015, many countries undertook that if they became signatories to Paris Convention, they will promise to bring down temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. And that's the objective. Why do we want to do energy efficiency labeling? Because after we have a labeling system, then we all use energy efficient products. Then directly or indirectly, we are able to curb the rise in temperature. But if we cannot be done, and then if this scheme becomes, just annoying to the public, then there's no need to have this amendment. From the information provided by the government, even with this change, we could only reduce 105,000 tons of carbon dioxide and save 1.5 units of electricity per household, etc. So it's really just a drop in the ocean. It doesn't achieve anything. But is it really the case? Well, it seems it's not the case. Why? Hong Kong, as an international city, and we are part of the C40 group, so we should try our best to be a demonstration city on climate change. Hong Kong is one of the C40 cities. I have explained, President, it's actually not just 40 cities. There are actually 90 cities now. Of course, it started with 40 cities. Now, if Mr. Ray Chan's motion to adjourn this debate is passed, and it gives them a sense of very wrong message. For C40, it covers cities of different scales. And in each state or region, perhaps there are different areas of concern. For Asia, our concern is electrical appliances, because we have many air conditioners, computers, and TVs. For many years, C40 has never launched any global initiative. Now, Hong Kong is able to lead C40 in doing something about saving energy for electrical appliances. So we can't say that because the measures in this order are of limited effect, so we shouldn't do them. No, I don't think so. Because C40 covers 650 million population. If all 650 million individuals care about climate change, care about saving energy, especially when they're buying electrical appliances, then we're not talking about reduction of just 105,000 tons of carbon dioxide, but perhaps 1.05 billion tons. So this order also serves an important educational function. If there's not a city to serve as a demonstration, other cities won't follow suit. Hong Kong is already a bit backward as a city in this area, because many other countries are saying they're going to switch to electric vehicles by 2030 or 2040. And that's also to tackle climate change. And this if energy efficient labeling scheme is also to tackle climate change. Now, Mr. Raymond Tam referred to a voluntary labeling scheme, but perhaps that is not directly relevant to this motion. That's why I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, even if we could only do a little, we'll do it, then based on that principle, I will object to Mr. Ray Chan's motion to adjourn. Now, but then I would consider supporting Mr. Ray Chan. That is, the third phase amendment. Can it be done? For any labeling scheme, is always objected to by the trade because it adds to their operating costs. It's the same with food labeling. It's the same with energy efficiency labeling. Any labeling scheme would add to the cost of operations of the trade. But then we're not talking about operating costs of a year or two. We're talking about a much longer time frame. The energy efficiency labeling scheme would actually, in the long run, increase the competitiveness of wholesalers, distributors, and retailers because everyone will be competing to produce energy-efficient products. But now, for some distributors, they're able to put the label on the on top of the product because there's a grade 1 label. You can see that on many air conditioners. But for the more energy-consuming appliances, consumers can never find the label because they put the label much further to the back. So there is an energy efficiency label scheme, but you do not mandate where that label should be put. So that is unfair treatment to some in the trade. But would it impose much pressure on the trade? Well, I don't see it because we see in the phase 1 and phase 2 scheme, we didn't hear much objections from the trade. Now we are on phase 3 of the labeling scheme, and there will be an 18 months grace period. But I must stress this, President. I don't see any, strict implementation of the scheme. For example, the location of putting labels already. There are, there's a strange arrangement. I've talked to trade as to whether this scheme would put pressure on them. Of course, the trade took the opportunity to tell me, well, it's not good to have all the schemes. But after the scheme is implemented, I hope the government can do this because the ultimate objective is to have a label for all household electrical appliances. So for manufacturers of appliances or the major distributors, then they can have a level playing field. That is, they must affix a label at the exact same location on each type of products. So then if we have that level playing field, this order won't affect them in any way. That's why I cannot support Mr. Ray Chan's motion to adjourn. Thank you. Mr. Charles Mock. I speak in opposition to the motion moved by Mr. Ray Chan to adjourn the debate. Well, I probably won't use up all 15 minutes, but I'll just say what I need to say. In the last round of debate, I pointed out that for this phase 3 mandatory energy efficiency labeling scheme, there are certain shortcomings. I focus on 2 points. One is public awareness of the scheme and whether they think the label is important. That's a matter of education. and not enough has been done there. So it may have nothing to do with the legislation. It has to do with the implementation by the relevant department. Even though there is this shortcoming, it doesn't mean that at this stage we should stop the phase 3 implementation. But of course, outside of the legislation, the government should do enough in education, public education, I mean. So even if there is this this consideration, I don't think we should then stop the implementation of phase 3. Another point, apart from affixing a label, are there other more innovative means? For example, we've seen in other legislation recently, there's some recycling practice. There's also a label for recycling. It seems that there's no coordination among the different labels. Even so, I do not believe that is strong enough reason to say that because you're not using the latest technology, or as some other members pointed out, there are shortcomings in implementation, such as the location of the label and so on. But because we want to make the government to do better, so now we will stop the implementation of phase 3. Well, I don't see any benefit in doing so. Yes, we know about the shortcomings of the scheme, but it's hoped that in the reply of the government, or more importantly in future, when implementing the scheme, the government could address all these shortcomings in terms of public education and implementation.
Additionally, I want to look at this from other angles. As suggested by Mr. Chen Ji-chin, there are reasons why we should shelve the third stage of the MEEL. The labeling scheme is supposed to allow the consumer more information to make an informed choice. And that's going about providing an easy to understand way to know the energy consumption of the appliances concerned. And of course, that would mean that the manufacturer would attach importance to energy efficiency. Members have made a lot of good suggestions in terms of the grading. We would like consumer to make an informed choice, and more products should be covered by the MEEL system. We hope by making the right decision on the part of the consumer, we would see better developments. And there's no reason why we should wait. And that's why I don't think I should support the the motion on adjournment. And now let's turn to the businessmen. Well, I'm one of the few members here who will consider the business perspective of the issues under discussion. We were talking about the other day on the labeling system for recycling of products. The business sector and the manufacturers express welcome to the proposed labeling. They wouldn't say that there is additional cost to us. It's not going to good for business if the energy consumption is is not very ideal. Let's not just talk about one's duty to Mother Earth, but well, everyone should do their bit. And from what I've seen, these people are not resisting the idea. So it's important nowadays. It's important to give more information to the consumers. The consumer is a very smart group of people. Hong Kong is actually lagging behind other places. We are not certainly leading the way. The mandatory energy efficiency labeling scheme covering some designated products is practiced by 40-odd countries in the US, in North America, in Europe, and also in Australia, different countries in Asia, China included. So they have a scheme with different scopes, and some would cover much more products, much more than Hong Kong scheme. The businessmen may object, and the members here representing the business sector may object, and the argument that therefore is that we should adjourn the debate. I don't think that's the right way to look at it, because this labeling scheme would allow those with good products to sell their products with the advantage of a good label. The business sector is accustomed to such practice. In the EU, they have many products covered by their schemes, including those in our three stages, and they have covered even more. For example, they have covered computers, computer servers, which are my constituency uses extensively. And of course, some members have mentioned the set-top box. It is advised that when you go out, you should switch off the set-top box. But I would switch off the main power supply switch when I go out. I hope the government would do more in public education. Thirdly, I hope you will see this from the perspective of protecting Earth. By 2030, our carbon intensity will have to be reduced by 70% compared with the 2005 levels. Power generation accounts for 70% of the carbon footprint. So we have to adopt all effective measures to reduce emissions and to do our part in protecting Earth. Madam Deputy, the government is promoting this smart city initiative in Hong Kong. In many cities, they will look at environmental protection and energy conservation as part of their smart city setup, not just it's not just about traffic and transport. So this is in line with the direction that we want to chart for Hong Kong in the development of a smart city. And when we talk about this, we need to look at the individuals' homes. We want to have smart homes where we have smart appliances. And of course, it's under the Bureau's responsibility. We have been talking about power consumption. I won't digress, Madam Deputy. it's not just about appliances. We have to have smart meters, because I sometimes I don't know the power consumption levels of my appliances, so we need smart meters as well. I won't go any further than that because it's not directly related to this item, but it's under the responsibility of the Bureau. The government is going to promulgate a blueprint, and they are going to talk about the smart home idea. We want to have a smart city. And there's no reason why in the fourth phase we want to put a stop to this phase. So I'm not going to support this motion to adjourn the debate. Lastly, I just want to refer to an example, and that is we cannot just rely on the labeling scheme to do the trick, to achieve the objective. This time, we cover a number of products, including storage-type electric water heaters. Among the products covered, I think in terms of power consumption, storage-type electric water heaters are more power consuming, because I really don't know how to switch it off. And very often people keep it on all the time. And recently, more and more buildings are installed with electric water heaters, storage type electric water heaters, because flats nowadays are getting smaller and smaller. So all our problems are real property problems. In many new flats, they don't have ventilation. They have a window in the toilet. So LPG heater or gas heater cannot be used. So these people, these families will have no choice but to use an electric water heater. Although you don't replace electric water heaters frequently, but when it's time to get a new one, it's important to know the power consumption of the replacement. With smaller and smaller flats built in Hong Kong, we need to pay attention to the power consumption of storage-type electric water heaters, because we are concerned about the rising consumption levels. As I've said, I'm not going to use up all my 15 minutes. So with these remarks, I oppose to the motion to adjourn the debate moved by Mr. Chen Chi-Chin. I hope this particular item can be passed as soon as possible. Mr. Hui Chi-fung, I share the views of other members. I oppose to the motion to adjourn the debate on the energy efficiency labeling products or ordinance, amendment of Schedule 1 Order 2017. I will try my very best not to repeat the arguments that have already been made, and I will not go into the details of the provisions in the order. There are some reasons why we should not adjourn the debate. In the past two policy addresses, the government have set some energy conservation policies and objectives. Can we achieve that objectives? If we adjourn this debate, we may be farther and farther away from the attainment of those objectives, and that would be a retrogressive step indeed. I have already said in support of this order. If the debate is adjourned, the order will not be passed. the Secretary has said that one of the important measures to conserve energy is to encourage behavioral change. Without behavioral change, we cannot influence the manufacturers. Indeed, there will be an opposite message. They will be moving back instead of forward. Things would be reversed. So no positive results. We're going to get something exactly the opposite. If this motion to adjourn is passed, and as the Secretary has said on many occasions, we should consider how we should do what should be done to alleviate the consequences of climate change. And under the Paris Agreement, we have to show the certain responsibility. We have to achieve certain objectives. All these will be impossible, and we will fail the international community in that we are not able to fulfill our responsibility. Mr. James Toh and other members have asked whether more can be done, which would be, drastically, substantially reduce carbon emission, which would enable us to move even faster than the effect achieved under this third phase of MEELS.
Perhaps that can be explored. I'd like the Secretary to address this point in his reply, because that would make our adjournment meaningful. If with this adjournment, in 12 months' time, we can come back with a more aggressive energy efficiency order, and we can go beyond labeling of products. We can even have tax incentives as provided in other jurisdictions. That would make this adjournment meaningful. But in our analysis, we have never heard in previous speeches from the Secretary that these objectives can be achieved. So I am going to elaborate on the points I just mentioned. I hope that the Secretary and members of the Council can then consider whether we should support Mr. Ray Chan's motion to adjourn this debate. First, on the policy objective front. In the last policy addresses, the government said categorically that we were committed to reducing carbon emission. By 2030, we have the real target to lower the carbon intensity to 60 to 7% of the 2005 level. That is a major commitment and a very important target. And then in 2010 to 2015, we had the 5-year plan, and it was said in the coming 5 years we're going to cut the carbon intensity by 40%. So this is the energy efficiency labeling of products ordinance. According to the administration, in phase 3, we're going to save 105 units of electricity, and then 3 phases together we can save 600 million units of electricity per year. And if this phase is not launched on time, can we catch up with that that objective? The Secretary should respond to this point, and Mr. Chan has the duty to answer these questions. If we cannot achieve these targets, then we will not be able to honor our commitment to reduce carbon emission in Hong Kong. And when it comes to behavioral change, in my
second reading speech to support this motion, I said that labeling of products is a very useful way to save energy. We should change consumers' behavior. We should encourage them to buy energy-efficient electrical appliances. This is very important. Change in consumer behavior will cause suppliers and distributors to change their behavior as well, so that the market as a whole will be geared towards energy-saving products. I like to use the productivity responsibility ordinance to draw an analogy. We should offer more choices for consumers to choose from. And of course, the labeling of products ordinance is mandatory in nature, or rather, the producer responsibility ordinance is mandatory in nature, whereas this is not. So how are the two related? Why should I use that as a justification for my opposition to the bill, to the motion? If the motion is passed, will give manufacturers a very wrong message. Under the producer responsibility legislation, I think mandating the labeling of such products would cause a lot of resistance from the market. It would affect the design of the product, and it's also very expensive. And for some very small products, a big label would affect the design. And for here, members of the manufacturers are saying that goods is not just for Hong Kong. They are also supplied to other places, and logistically, they encounter a lot of problems. They don't know when and how the labels should be affixed. And for the mandatory energy efficiency label ordinance, manufacturers can fix it themselves. And for the producer responsibility scheme, labels have to be supplied by the EPD. If this legislation is passed, then it's perfect for manufacturers. They were originally working very hard to beat the deadline to ensure that before products are launched to the market, they have the labels ready. And if they discover that the legislature, which is supposed to represent the people, is not too keen to have this scheme in place, they were planning for energy efficient products. They are more costly to develop, but they think they would be welcomed by the market. Now, they may have the signal, they may receive the signal that the public are not too concerned as to whether products are energy efficient, and then they may continue to develop and produce high energy consumption products. So that's one of my reasons for not supporting Mr. Ray Chan's adjournment motion. If the motion is not passed, does the government have more measures to ensure energy saving so that we can mitigate the negative impacts brought about by climatic changes? It's not that the government has no other measures to take. Now, I will not repeat my point, the causes and the seriousness of climate change, because globally and locally there is no dispute about that. But we have measures. There are measures taken overseas that can help us to achieve the committed targets in the policy address even without the energy efficiency labeling ordinance? For instance, can we use tax concessions? Let me use an American example. There are energy efficiency promotion measures there in the U.S. They have an act to promote energy saving in 1992 and 2005. There were acts respectively, and in 2007 there was an act on energy autonomy and safety. We haven't explored these measures yet. Now, I come to tax concessions here. In the U.S., if you purchase energy efficient electrical appliances, there would be tax incentives. In 1978, there was an act passed in the U.S., and then in 2005, Energy Policy Act implemented the provisions there. When you purchase new electrical appliances to improve energy efficiency at home, you are entitled to tax concessions, so as to encourage consumers to buy energy efficient televisions, water heaters, cookers, and washing machines. In between 2008 and 2009, 30 million such appliances were produced, and then millions of units of electricity was saved. And there is also the energy property tax credit on capital investment of residential developments. They have heat insulation devices, and for window and upgrading of air conditioning systems, and electric and hybrid vehicles. They offer tax incentives for purchasing such products. That is tackled in the same piece of legislation, and they've also got another act to promote energy efficiency buildings. These measures may not be the same as what we have in Hong Kong, but they offer tax incentives. Have we got anything similar in Hong Kong? I'd like to ask whether the administration or the member who's moving this motion to work out, to do some calculation, so that even though this order is abolished, can we achieve our committed targets before the deadline? And I think this is for the consideration of all members here from different political parties. Without such information, without such calculation, I'm afraid I cannot accept Mr. Ray Chan's adjournment motion. I hope members can consider supporting the order itself and oppose Mr. Ray Chan's motion. Thank you. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Madam Deputy. In my first speech, I already said that I support the Energy Efficiency Labeling of Products Ordinance, Amendment of Schedule 1, Order 2017. Although I do have views on how it should be implemented, I still believe that the principal ordinance should be passed as soon as possible. Although we are moving too slowly, it is better than marking time. Mr. Ray Chan would like to adjourn the debate of this piece of legislation. This is hardly acceptable. We have to ask whether adjourning the debate here would ensure that within a very short period of time we can come up with a better piece of legislation. Now, starting from 2009, we had the first phase of the labeling system, and in 2007, or 2017, even if we pass this legislation, there will only be 10 types of household electrical appliances that will be covered. And let's not forget that 3 among these 10 can only be can only come under the mandatory scheme in the next phase. So will this adjournment ensure that within a short period of time we can come up with a more effective way of saving energy? Well, I think at best we can only have the 3 remaining products advanced to the next phase, but that would cause the original products to be delayed in complying with the labeling requirement. So we cannot really use this scheme to improve energy efficiency in this way. If this motion is adjourned, then there may be a wrong signal sent to manufacturers. We may not be able to change their behavior. Perhaps this is over-worried. Still, I am against the adjournment motion because from the producer's point of view, it will make their products more competitive if they can provide energy efficient products, and therefore they are trying to tell consumers how energy saving their products are. So I'm not too worried about this, but if we adjourn our debate of this order, I'm afraid that there will be a wrong signal sent to the market. Consumers may think that this legislature has changed its position when it comes to energy efficiency and environmental protection. The effect may not be seen in the very short term, but in the long term, this is going to undermine the secretary's efforts in helping to save energy, because the market may think that this legislature doesn't support the work of the secretary in mapping our blueprint to save energy. They may think that we do not trust the secretary. And this message is very wrong. It will be sent to consumers and to the community. And therefore, by no means we should support this motion. There are also other views,
which is about the acts of the government. Now, for this energy efficiency labeling of products order, it's just to do with carbon emission, which is a very small part of the overall scheme of improving air quality. As the government pointed out, even if we could roll out phase 3 of the scheme, it only brings about minor improvement in the overall scheme of things. But still we must proceed because we need to start somewhere. So very often it's government's behavior that will influence the overall improvement of energy efficiency. Now, in your reply, I hope you will respond to our point, Secretary. Now, many members have raised their views for, there's a tender scheme, and but it will only take place in March 2018, and then the contractor will only start work in June next year. But on energy performance, the Environment Bureau has not come up with any quantitative indicators, although the Bureau says it attaches great importance to energy efficiency. Now, we said the government should adopt the latest technology, but then the government would say that for the LED standards, they are not yet stable, so they're not suitable for use as tunnel lighting. For government procurement of equipment and devices, there will be September 2020. So that's 5 years after implementation or commencement. So the government should review your entire procurement policy in the government. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how many energy efficiency labeling schemes we have to target consumers or the general public or even the manufacturers. They don't add up. They could not offset the energy wasted by the government as a whole. If we want to achieve the relevant energy targets, then all stakeholders need to make an effort. You can't say that as government, I'll just direct you what to do, but I'm not doing anything. No, that's not the attitude. Even though I have great criticisms for the government, I don't think that by adjourning this debate we could make the government change its behavior in a short time frame. Now, Kam-sing headed the Environment Bureau for the past 5 years, and then you've been actively promoting the scheme. So you should give us some positive response today. If I give you 2 months, 3 months, you still can't do anything if you don't want to do it. But if you want to do it tomorrow already, you can tell the public clearly that for the energy efficiency requirement for each department, what the specific requirements are. You could do that, or maybe even for the procurement policy policy of each department, it should be the most energy efficient. You could have said that too. And then when implementing a project, you should the government could procure products which are the most energy efficient. If you would only say that, that means government is taking a far bigger responsibility. So I don't support the German motion, but I really want the government, especially the Secretary for Environment, to take responsibility for energy efficiency for the government as a whole. Yes, even though we support your scheme, you have to tell us that government has the determination to do what I just mentioned. Because otherwise, the public will lose confidence in the government. They won't be sure if the government is committed, and we don't want to see that. Now, we know there's an important stakeholder as far as energy efficiency is concerned, but we don't know what its role is. Here I'm talking about the 2 power companies. Now they play an important role in promoting energy efficiency. Their business is about generating power. And of course, then they would like people to use more electricity. But then the government has a scheme of control with agreements with the 2 power companies. So we should impose the responsibility on the power companies in terms of reduction of carbon emission. Otherwise, the 2 companies won't be proactive in doing anything. Now, over the years, in your negotiations with the power companies, you've only been asking the power companies to make minor improvements, and if you do, I will reward you, and so on. But here we talk about 2 franchised power companies. They have a history of over a century in Hong Kong. And each year they enjoy staggering profit because of their franchised position. And that's why many people buy their stocks. So in that case, shouldn't they shoulder a bigger responsibility? You know, as socially responsible corporate, the power companies have the duty to encourage their consumers to be efficient in using energy in the household. Now, for all new types of electrical appliances, there is a standby mode, but many studies show that this standby mode is already is consuming 2 or 3% of electricity when the appliance is not being used. So this is something that could be easily tackled. And then energy could be used in other more useful manner. So would the government consider that, or the two power companies only focus on making profit? But then, even if we pass this adjournment today, I don't think the Bureau and the two power companies could reach any agreement soon. Because the government needs to show its determination in the negotiations process. If you don't project or that determination, the two power companies won't care, because they want people to consume more electricity, then they have higher profit. And also, the two power companies, what is their position on the electricity consumption in the business sector? Now, given the current tariff model or structure, if people use more electricity, they get a better deal. So that won't encourage shopping malls or other commercial consumers to save on energy or electricity. So these are the two issues concerning the power companies. But are we going to get any answers even if the debate is adjourned? No. So there are many different views on the philosophy and the actual practice of the government in relation to energy conservation. And I don't think we can see any changes we would like to see in a short-term period of time. So we need to send out a message to consumers and the general public. Energy efficiency is a subject of common concern to the government and this council. That's why I am against Mr. Ray Chan's motion. But hopefully in your reply in the adjournment debate or on the order, you need to show the determination of the government. And this determination must be translated into quantitative indicators. You can't just make general statements. We've asked the government many times whether you have set any targets for government departments, because you are a major stakeholder. If you could set targets on energy consumption for all departments, then you could involve, you would change the attitude and the mindset of all those involved in making energy efficiency policies. Thank you. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Madam Deputy, I speak in opposition to Mr. Ray Chan's motion to adjourn the debate. Here we're talking about a resolution under the Energy Efficiency Labeling of Products Ordinance. If this resolution is passed, then there are more types of electrical appliances whose energy efficiency level would be made more transparent. And I think we are moving far too slowly already on this front. Now, the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department launched the Voluntary Energy Efficiency Labeling Scheme. That was 1995. It was before the reunification. So the government started a labeling scheme then. Global warming, carbon emission leading to greenhouse gas at a time were already concerns. Now we are in 2017, so it's been 20 years, 22 years rather. And it's only after 22 years we are moving to phase 3 of a mandatory energy efficiency labeling scheme. So we are moving far too slowly. So we will only criticize the scheme for being too slow to implement. So we won't adjourn or terminate the scheme. Because if we do, then it's not about giving consumers more transparent information so they could opt for more energy efficiency consumer products. So by adjourning this order, that means we are delaying things. Now, the ordinance commenced in 2008. It was only in 2009 that we had the first phase of the mandatory labeling scheme. 3 types of products: air conditioners, cooling the equipment, and compact fluorescent lamps are included. So that's phase 1. In phase 2, 2011, 2 other types of products were added to the list: washing machines and dehumidifiers. Now we're in 2017, 6 years later, after phase 2. And now we propose to add more types of electrical appliances to the list. Televisions, induction ovens, washing machines, water heaters, and air conditioners of reverse cycle type. Only now you're including this appliances in phase 3, so things are really moving far too slowly. That's why I cannot support the motion to adjourn the debate. Otherwise, you delay the whole implementation program.
I have to point out that the SAR government has come up with a new emission reduction target. Mr. Wong Kam-sing, the secretary, announced the blueprint. Under that particular blueprint, we have to reduce the energy intensity by 40% when we reach 2025. According to Mr. Wong Kam-sing, to achieve this goal, we must involve everyone in the community. We must change our behavior, and we should invest more in energy efficient appliances and technology. To achieve this new target of energy intensity, a number of measures and initiatives have been implemented, including this particular item before us, the energy efficiency labeling system. If this is to be shelved, then things will be delayed. I'm afraid this new energy conservation blueprint published in 2015 will not be achieved. Mr. Wong Kam-sing said at the time that if we could not achieve that objective, energy consumption has been rising globally, and to meet the increasing demand, we have problems associated with the use of fossil fuels, air pollution, and climate change. We must promote energy conservation in the community. We must make it make energy conservation a habit of everyone, so that we would be more energy conscious, and Hong Kong would become a low-carbon, livable city. So I absolutely cannot accept this motion to adjourn the debate moved by Mr. Chan Chi-chun. What are the problems caused by global warming? And how the labeling scheme that we're talking about may affect our day-to-day life. Well, there are a lot of discussion internationally recently because under the presidency of Donald Trump, the U.S. has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement, and it said that they will not recognize that we have this problem with global warming. But I believe we have had sufficient discussions and evidence to point out that if we do not reduce carbon emissions, then the greenhouse gases would lead to the rise of global temperature. In the past 50 years, we discharged a lot of greenhouse gases. These gases absorb the heat from the sun, and the heat is kept within our atmosphere and is also reflected back to the land, and therefore we have a global warming phenomenon. And as a result, the water level, sea level, is rising. Low-lying areas are affected. In some countries, the coastal regions will likely to be affected by global warming, and that would include Hong Kong. And there will also be unusual climate conditions such as drought and flooding. And our life, our resources, our economy will be severely affected. We want to promote energy efficiency. Hong Kong, as an international city, should do our part in energy efficiency promotion. As a member of the international community, we are duty-bound to do it. Therefore, in respect of this motion to agenda debate, moved by Mr. Chen Chi-chin, I'm against it. In fact, we are moving way too slow. We should extend the coverage of the energy labeling scheme. Apart from this mandatory labeling scheme, we have had voluntary schemes as well, covering 22 electrical and appliances used in homes and offices, including 13 home appliances. For example, the compact fluorescent lamp, rice cookers, office equipment, photocopiers, fax machines, multi-purpose office printers, LCD monitor, drinking fountains, and so on. I believe all members here are using some of these appliances. These have not yet been covered in the mandatory energy efficiency labeling scheme. Power consumption of offices is 3 times that of homes. 90% of our power generation is consumed by buildings or offices or homes. So the mandatory scheme should cover the appliances used in commercial buildings. If we do not cover these appliances soon, then we will be just monitoring appliances and their energy efficiency, which is a small part of the whole picture, which are consuming the less energy than those office appliances. We should provide the necessary information to inform the consumer so that they can make a smart choice. We are lagging behind the community, the international community. And we are covering fewer appliances than other countries. And given that the government has set itself a new target, there's all the more reason to cover more appliances. And therefore, this motion to adjourn the debate at this point cannot be accepted. We would like to enhance, extend the labeling scheme. But as the Consumer Council published in its report in May, 14 types of inverse cycled air conditioners, reverse cycle type air conditioners were tested. This is one of those 5 covered in the current order. Although they all comply with the Grade 1 label standards, but the power consumption can be different by 20%. And that is to say, even if this new labeling requirement is implemented, but as a matter of fact, even if this resolution is passed now, the manufacturers or retailers still have 18 months to make the necessary transitional arrangements. And also within Grade 1 appliances, there is a great diversity in terms of power consumption and energy efficiency. So the government should look into this issue raised by the Consumer Council, and that is the variation of energy efficiency within the same grade. If it can be as much as 20%, or in terms of power consumption as much as 24%, maybe we should have a more refined system of different grades of label. And if the relevant labels can contain power efficiency, energy efficiency when it's in standby mode, then the consumer will have more information to go by. So on the one hand, we should tell the consumer the energy efficiency, the power consumption during operation, and also the power consumption when it's in standby mode. Because our appliances are always plugged most of the time. So I think we should not drag our feet. Given the global warming, Hong Kong should not lag behind the international community in energy conservation and in enhancing transparency on consumers' information. We should cover as many appliances as we can so that we can show that the responsibility of protecting Earth and promoting energy conservation. Ms. Claudia Mo.
The adjournment proposal. Now, some of the arguments would go saying that we're already lagging behind in our energy efficiency drive in Hong Kong, and there's no reason we shouldn't prolong this particular energy labeling thing further. Now, the thing is, I think many people didn't even realize what exactly we're talking about. It's meals. Do you know what I'm talking about? M-E-E-L-S, meals. Not having a lunch or dinner, but M-E-E-L-S. It's mandatory energy efficiency labeling. And I did wonder, what's that S at the very end? I thought it would be about more electrical appliances being included in the plan or something. No, it just means scheme, mandatory energy efficiency labeling scheme. Now, this is a teeny tiny thing. Of course, it's better than nothing, as I was saying yesterday. It's surely better than nothing. It's aimed to lower the city's carbon consumption to start with, and to help raise public awareness over energy saving. But the thing is, the government is just not doing enough. And I have no intention to blame the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department. It's a technical department. You have the policy upstairs, and they would execute it, and so they are doing it. But then it's a perfunctory scheme when it comes to saving energy in Hong Kong. Now, can I repeat? I'm not blaming the department in any way. I'm blaming the government as a whole over its green policy, or rather the lack of it, really, or rather the lack of the actual enthusiasm, the passion for it. Now, we're talking about energy efficiency ordinance. It's slightly dishonest the way we put it at this Legislative Council, because the actual ordinance should be about buildings, right? Building energy efficiency ordinance. Well, never mind. Never mind. We're talking about tiny little electrical appliances for now. But the thing is, we shouldn't prolong it, so we go against the adjournment. What difference, time-wise, would it make, really? At most, I would say half a year, 6 months. We've prolonged this for long enough. We need to send a message to the top of the government, the actual policy makers upstairs, that we need a faster pace. To say, our electrical stoves must have labeling on them telling how energy efficient they are. What's the big deal, really? What if that's slightly delayed anyway? In the last 5 years of the CY Leung tenure, there's no such thing about energy saving labeling anyway. As I was saying, right, yesterday, you heard me. Nothing was done for 5 years, and suddenly something is of such urgency all of a sudden. I mean, what's the urgency? We need to send a big, big message to this government instead, that we need something more all-round, more realistic about saving energy in Hong Kong. Talking about stoves and little appliances of sorts. What about escalators and lifts inside buildings? They use a massive amount of energy. And really, everyone knew, the specialists were sitting there. Our energy consumption in Hong Kong mostly came from buildings, not appliances. Of course, appliances also count, of course. But then, shall we not have started? Shouldn't we have started with bigger things about restricting the use of energy? I don't know how exactly, but restricting the use of energy of the lifts and escalators in general, right? Air conditioning, central heating, things like that. So we need to tell the government that doing tiny things is better than nothing indeed. But ultimately, we need to get a proper a more sort of full-hearted, a real full-hearted promise from the government that Hong Kong is really lagging behind in energy saving in the international arena, and we must catch up, and they should think twice and work even harder. Assuming they are already working hard. But the government's just technocrats. I really don't know what they think of the carbon the reduction thing on the energy front. Seriously. They made all kinds of half-hearted attempts, and yet they're very good at throwing out small little thingies and pretend that they've done something. It's not right. As I was saying, minor things, as I was saying yesterday, minor things like this. Well, sorry, this is now in Chinese, but never mind. Irons. Shouldn't irons be included even, right? More. Once you do it, you might as well expand your scope of applicability. Might as well, right? Iron. Use 40 minutes of this steam iron thing. You would consume 1,500 watt of energy. It's not right. So please, could the government rethink on the whole thing? And as my honourable colleague Wu Ji-wai was saying, shouldn't this government be taking the lead? What has the government been buying, purchasing, using public money? All these wasteful, mentality. I don't know what exactly they buy. It's not very transparent, right? So all the government purchases, exactly what kind of electrical things they've been purchasing, we don't know. And so I would like to assure my democratic colleagues that if you agree to this adjournment today, now, it seriously wouldn't make that much difference to the how this new rule, this mandatory labeling business would be applied. It would be minute, really. Wouldn't make so much difference time-wise, except we need, maybe united we stand, right? We need to send a collective message to this government that it's just not doing well. And some also argue that, as most of us thought, it's better than nothing. Shall we not take it on board first, right? Pocket it first, we would say in Chinese. Why not? I'm not against it at all. I'm most agreeable to the whole thing, except I think the scope is not wide enough, and I think people up there in the power echelon should know what we at the legislative branch think, and they should take into consideration our thoughts. Now, I was saying yesterday, once again, you were here, you heard me. It's very coincidental. On Tuesday, I read in the Independent newspaper, which is a British paper, 15,000 scientists around the world, including Nobel laureates, sent out this new letter. It's got a proper name. Let me check. It's actually called Letter to Humanity, saying that humankind must do more to help save the earth. And Hong Kong, come on, we are not just cosmopolitan. We are an international financial hub, right? you as some accountant, you should know. We need to show to the rest of the world that we care and we are doing our best. Charles Mock was saying just now, oh, the government is doing what he would call cow's pace, 牛步, he was saying. No, I call it snail's pace, 蝸牛啊. It's so slow. It's completely unthinkable in Hong Kong. And in that letter I was talking about, as published by the independent newspaper, the scientists, international scientists, they're not tree huggers. They're not just some green hippies. They're warning us. Time is running out. Time is running out. And Hong Kong, as this pivotal center, our transport and housing chief kept calling Hong Kong this pivot. We have this pivotal role on the international map, right? We must do much more. Now that letter was actually written 25 years ago, and it was just being renewed. And I hope some government official in Hong Kong would have read it. It's not long at all. Now, it was saying that cities, it didn't name Hong Kong, of course, but cities in general have this economy-rooted kind of mentality. Growth, right? Development comes before conservation kind of thing. And we must learn to reduce greenhouse gases, blah, blah. We knew renewable energy. We also knew, oh, there's one line that's quite scary. It says, the amount of fresh water available per head of population worldwide has reduced by 26%. How about that? Now that's water supplies. It's got nothing to do with our electrical and mechanical services department, of course. But it's still energy. It's still growth. It is still the earth, Mother Earth, our home. So this government, I hope, would really think thoroughly, think it through what's been done in Hong Kong by introducing minor little things. Well, minor, although it still would count collectively, of course, in the end. And to finish off, I would like to mention this sort of the extension sockets, right? Last night, I actually checked the electrical and mechanical services department out online. I never knew you actually taught people how to use intelligent sockets so that even when it's at standby mode, some clever wiring inside would stop the power flow. It will automatically conduct a power cut even when it's on standby mode. Now, things like that I never knew. Why wouldn't the government make it more public instead of wasting time, public money, on promoting all kinds of political slogans and things? Why wouldn't the government publicize saving energy measures to the public? Thank you.
鄺俊宇議員。